You're lying in your bed tonight, perhaps in a city with millions of people, surrounded by the gentle hum of civilization. Traffic lights regulate the flow of cars through carefully planned streets. Written laws govern your society. Banks manage your money with complex mathematical systems. Schools teach children to read and write. Temples, churches, and mosques offer spiritual guidance to those who seek it. But have you ever wondered where all of this began? When did humans first gather in cities? Who invented writing? Where did the first laws come from? Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let me take you on a journey back through time, back to the very beginning of civilization itself, to a land where two mighty rivers carved their way through an ancient landscape, creating the fertile soil where humanity would plant its first seeds of organized society. Close your eyes and imagine a world over 6,000 years ago. The Great Pyramids haven't been built yet. Rome doesn't exist. The alphabet hasn't been invented. Most of humanity still lives in small bands, following herds of animals across vast landscapes, sleeping under the stars, carrying everything they own on their backs. But in one special corner of the world, something extraordinary is about to happen. Something that will change the course of human history forever. Picture yourself standing on a windswept plain in what we now call Iraq. The year is around 4000 BCE. Two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, win their way through this landscape like silver serpents, carrying life-giving water from distant mountains to the Persian Gulf. Between these rivers lies a land the ancient Greeks would later call Mesopotamia, meaning the land between rivers. Here, in this fertile cradle, the first chapter of civilization is about to unfold. As you watch this ancient landscape in your mind, notice how different it looks from the world you know. There are no roads, no cities, no monuments reaching toward the sky. Just endless grasslands dotted with small settlements, where families have begun to abandon their nomadic ways and settle down beside the life-giving waters. These early people have discovered something remarkable. They can grow their own food instead of constantly searching for it. Let the gentle rhythm of your breathing match the slow, eternal flow of these ancient rivers as we begin our journey into humanity's greatest story. The story of how we learn to live together, to build together, to dream together. The story of the first civilization. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For thousands of years after the last ice age ended, small groups of hunter-gatherers had been experimenting with a revolutionary idea: staying in one place. Along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, they discovered wild grains growing in abundance, wild wheat and barley that could be harvested, stored, and replanted. Slowly, generation by generation, these wandering people began to settle down. Imagine you're one of these early settlers, around 8000 BCE. You've spent your entire life following the seasons, moving when the herds moved, sleeping wherever nightfall found you. But now, for the first time in your family's memory, you're building something permanent. Your hands shape mud and reeds into walls that will stand for years, not just days. You're creating the world's first homes. These early settlements were modest affairs. Round huts clustered together near the riverbanks, surrounded by the first experimental fields where humans learned to coax food from the soil. At places like Tel Es Sawan and Jarmo, archaeologists have found the remains of these pioneering communities. Stone tools for grinding grain, clay vessels for storing water and food. The humble beginnings of technology. But perhaps the most revolutionary change was invisible. For the first time in human history, people were producing more food than they could immediately consume. This surplus, this extra grain stored in clay jars, would prove to be the spark that ignited civilization. Because when you don't have to spend every waking moment searching for your next meal, you can begin to specialize. You can become skilled at making pottery, or weaving baskets, or crafting tools. You can trade your creations for the surplus food that others have grown. As you relax deeper into sleep, let your mind drift along these ancient rivers, watching as centuries pass like flowing water. The small settlements grow larger. The round huts give way to rectangular houses built of sun-dried brick. The first neighborhoods take shape, and in the fertile southern plains where the rivers approach the sea, something unprecedented begins to emerge. By 3500 BCE, some of these settlements have grown into something the world has never seen before. True cities. Not just large villages, but complex urban centers housing thousands of people. Imagine walking through the streets of Uruk, one of the world's first great cities. Your feet would tread on pathways between massive mud brick buildings that rise like mountains from the flat plain. The air would buzz with the sounds of specialized craftsmen, metalworkers hammering bronze, potters spinning their wheels, weavers working their looms. At the heart of the city stands something that defies the imagination, a temple platform rising tier by tier toward the heavens. This early ziggurat, gleaming white in the desert sun, can be seen for miles across the landscape. It represents more than just impressive architecture. It embodies humanity's first attempt to reach toward the divine through organized, collective effort. The people who built these early cities called themselves something that sounds strange to modern ears. In their own language, they were the black-headed people. We know them as the Sumerians, and they were about to give humanity some of its most fundamental gifts. Picture yourself as a young person in ancient Sumer, around 3200 BCE. You live in a world that would seem both alien and familiar. Alien because there are no wheels yet, no horses, no iron tools. But familiar because you live in a real city with real streets, real neighborhoods, real jobs. Your father might be a farmer who tends the barley fields outside the city walls. Your mother might be a weaver who creates textiles in her workshop. Your older brother might be learning the prestigious craft of metalworking, shaping copper into tools and weapons. But the most prestigious job of all belongs to a small group of specialists who work in the temple complex at the city's heart. These are the scribes, and they're developing something that will change everything. The ability to capture human thoughts and preserve them in clay. It begins simply enough. The temple administrators need to keep track of the goods flowing in and out of their storehouses. How many sheep belong to the temple? How much grain was contributed by each farmer? How much beer was distributed to the workers? At first, they use a system of clay tokens, small shapes that represent different commodities. A cone for grain, a sphere for cattle, a disc for sheep. But gradually, these three-dimensional tokens give way to something more efficient. Two-dimensional marks pressed into clay tablets. A picture of a sheep means a sheep. A picture of grain means grain. These early pictographs are humanity's first tentative steps toward writing. As the decades pass, something magical happens. The pictures become more abstract, more stylized. They begin to represent not just things, but sounds. The mark for water can also represent the sound A, because that's how you pronounce water in Sumerian. Suddenly, these scribes can write down names, ideas, stories, laws. They can capture the invisible world of human thought and make it permanent. Imagine holding one of these early clay tablets in your hands. The cuneiform marks, made by pressing a reed stylus into wet clay, feel rough beneath your fingertips. But these simple wedge-shaped impressions represent one of the most momentous achievements in human history. For the first time, knowledge can outlive the person who created it. Stories can be told to children not yet born. Laws can be written down so they apply equally to everyone. The invention of writing transforms everything. Suddenly, these early cities can coordinate activities on an unprecedented scale. They can keep detailed records of trade transactions. They can send messages across great distances. They can preserve their religious beliefs, their legal codes, their poetry and literature for future generations. But writing is just one of many innovations emerging from these remarkable early cities. Let your mind wander through the workshops and marketplaces of ancient Sumer as craftsmen perfect techniques that will echo through the ages. The potter's wheel, spinning steadily as skilled hands shape vessels of impossible thinness and beauty. The first wheeled vehicles, crude but revolutionary, beginning to transform how goods and people move across the landscape. The smelting of copper and tin to create bronze, harder and more durable than any metal humanity has worked with before. In the fields surrounding the cities, an agricultural revolution is quietly unfolding. These early Sumerians are masters of irrigation, channeling the unpredictable floods of the Tigris and Euphrates into an intricate network of canals, levees, and reservoirs. They've learned to make the desert bloom, to turn arid plains into productive farmland that can feed thousands of people. But perhaps their greatest innovation is social rather than technological. These early cities represent humanity's first experiment in living together in large numbers. How do you govern thousands of people who aren't all related to each other? How do you resolve disputes? How do you organize public works projects? How do you defend against enemies? The Sumerians developed solutions that will echo through history. They create the world's first complex governments, with councils of elders, assemblies of citizens, and eventually kings who claim divine authority. They establish the first formal law codes, written rules that apply to everyone, regardless of their social status. They build the first armies organized into specialized units, spearmen, archers, charioteers working in coordinated formations. They also create the world's first organized religions, with professional priests who maintain elaborate temples and conduct complex rituals designed to ensure the favor of the gods. These aren't the simple spiritual practices of hunter-gatherer bands, but sophisticated theological systems, complete with creation myths, moral codes, and promises of life after death. As you drift deeper towards sleep, imagine the sounds that would have filled these ancient cities as the sun set over the Mesopotamian plain. The lowing of cattle being driven back from the fields, the voices of merchants haggling in the marketplace, the rhythmic hammering of metalworkers finishing their daily labor, the chanting of priests conducting evening rituals in the temple complex, the laughter of children playing in the narrow streets between mud brick houses. This is the sound of civilization being born, the sound of humanity learning to live together, to work together, to dream together. In these first cities, people who had never met before found ways to cooperate on massive projects. Strangers learned to trust each other enough to engage in complex trade relationships. Individuals began to see themselves as part of something larger than their immediate family or clan. The Sumerian cities weren't perfect. They were often at war with each other, fighting over water rights, trade routes, and territorial boundaries. Their societies were rigidly hierarchical, with sharp distinctions between nobles, commoners, and slaves. Their kings could be cruel and their gods demanding, but they represented something entirely new in human experience. Complex societies that could sustain themselves across generations, accumulating knowledge, wealth, and power in ways that had never been possible before. By 2900 BCE, these city-states had reached remarkable levels of sophistication. Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, and dozens of other urban centers dotted the landscape between the rivers. Each had its own patron deity, its own ruling dynasty, its own distinctive culture. Yet they shared enough in common: language, religion, technology, artistic traditions, that we can speak of a unified Sumerian civilization. Trade networks connected these cities not just to each other, but to distant lands. Sumerian merchants traveled by ship down the Persian Gulf and up the Tigris and Euphrates. They crossed the mountains to Anatolia in search of metals. They journeyed to the Indus Valley, in what is now Pakistan, establishing commercial relationships with other early civilizations. lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, timber from Lebanon, precious metals from Iran, all flowed into Sumerian cities in exchange for grain, textiles, and manufactured goods. This expanding web of trade relationships helped spread Sumerian innovations across the ancient world. Other peoples learned to use the wheel, to work with bronze, to organize irrigation systems, to develop writing. The spark of civilization, first kindled between the Tigris and Euphrates, began to illuminate other corners of the world. As our first chapter in this ancient story draws toward its close, rest easy knowing that this is just the beginning. The Sumerians have given humanity its first taste of what's possible when people work together toward common goals. They've shown that humans can create beauty, can preserve knowledge, can build things that last beyond any individual lifetime, but their story is far from over. In the centuries to come, new peoples will arrive in Mesopotamia, bringing fresh ideas and new ambitions. Empires will rise and fall. Great kings will emerge to unite the land between the rivers under single rule. The world's first laws will be carved in stone. Magnificent cities will rise to heights that dwarf even Sumerian achievements. Tonight, as you sleep, let your dreams carry you along these ancient rivers, where the first chapter of human civilization unfolded beneath desert stars that still shine in our modern sky. The same moon that illuminated the first Sumerian scribes learning to write illuminates your bedroom window tonight. The same human hopes and fears that drove those ancient people to build their first cities still drive us to build and dream and reach for something greater than ourselves. The story of Mesopotamia is the story of us all. It's the story of how we learnt to be human together. And this is only the beginning. The gentle flow of the Tigris and Euphrates continues to carry us forward through time, where new chapters of human achievement are about to unfold. As you rest comfortably in your bed tonight, let your mind drift back to around 2400 BCE, when the peaceful world of independent city-states is about to be transformed by ambition, conquest, and the birth of something unprecedented: the world's first empire. Picture yourself standing on the walls of Akkad, a city whose exact location remains hidden beneath the sands of time, somewhere near modern Baghdad. The morning air carries the dust of marching armies and the distant sound of bronze weapons being sharpened. A man named Sargon has risen from humble beginnings, perhaps as a gardener's son, perhaps as a foundling rescued from the river, like some legendary hero. But his origins matter less than his vision: to unite all the lands between the rivers under a single crown. Imagine the revolutionary nature of Sargon's dream. For over 1,000 years, the Sumerian cities had existed as independent entities, each with its own king, its own patron god, its own fierce local pride. The idea that one man could rule them all seemed as impossible as touching the stars. Yet, Sargon possessed something that would make the impossible inevitable: an organized, professional army and the strategic genius to use it. As you breathe slowly and deeply, let your mind follow Sargon's campaigns southward into the heartland of Sumerian civilization. One by one, the great cities fall to his disciplined forces. Uruk, the ancient center of learning and culture. Ur, with its magnificent temples and bustling harbors. Lagash, famous for its skilled craftsmen and wise rulers. Each conquest brings not just territory, but knowledge, wealth, and the human resources needed to build something larger than any single city could sustain. But Sargon's genius lies not just in conquest, but in what he does after victory. Unlike raiders who plunder and withdraw, he creates something entirely new: an administrative system that can govern vast territories. He replaces local rulers with appointed governors, often members of his own family. He establishes his language, Akkadian, as the tongue of government and trade. He creates the world's first professional standing army, soldiers who owe loyalty not to any city or tribe, but to the emperor himself. Picture yourself as a scribe in this new imperial administration, around 2300 BCE. Your clay tablets no longer record just the affairs of a single city, but the business of an empire stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. You write letters between governors separated by hundreds of miles. You record tribute flowing in from dozens of conquered territories. You draft treaties with distant kings who now acknowledge Sargon's supremacy. You're witnessing the birth of international diplomacy, the first time in human history that political coordination has operated on such a vast scale. The empire that Sargon creates represents more than military success. It's humanity's first experiment in governing diverse peoples under unified rule. Sumerians and Akkadians, city dwellers and nomads, merchants and farmers, all must somehow find their place within this new political framework. The challenges are immense. How do you collect taxes fairly across such varied economies? How do you maintain loyalty among conquered peoples? How do you communicate across the vast distances that separate the empire's far-flung territories? Sargon's solutions become the template for empire building that will echo through history. He standardizes weights and measures to facilitate trade. He builds roads and establishes messenger systems to speed communication. He creates a common legal framework while allowing local customs to persist. Most importantly, he develops the concept of imperial ideology, the idea that his rule brings peace, prosperity, and divine favor to all his subjects. Let your thoughts drift along the trade routes that flourish under imperial protection. Merchants can now travel safely from the mountains of Anatolia to the shores of the Persian Gulf, carrying goods and ideas across unprecedented distances. A potter in Mesopotamia can learn techniques from craftsmen in Syria. A farmer in Sumer can plant seeds developed in the highlands of Iran. The empire becomes a vast network for sharing knowledge, technology, and cultural innovations. But empires, as you'll discover in your dreams tonight, are fragile things. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, pushes imperial power to its absolute peak, even declaring himself a god and wearing the horned crown traditionally reserved for deities. His armies reach the cedar forests of Lebanon and the silver mines of Anatolia. Tribute flows from lands so distant that few Mesopotamians have ever heard their names. Yet this very success contains the seeds of future problems. Imagine yourself as a provincial governor during Naram-Sin's reign, struggling to maintain order in territories that stretch beyond the horizon. Communication with the capital takes weeks. Local rebellions flare up faster than you can suppress them. The costs of maintaining garrisons in distant lands drain the imperial treasury. The very size that makes the empire impressive also makes it increasingly difficult to govern effectively. As you settle deeper into sleep, picture the slow unraveling that follows Naram-Sin's death. External enemies, particularly the Gutians from the Zagros Mountains, begin raiding imperial territories. Provincial governors assert increasing independence. Trade networks fragment as political unity dissolves. By 2154 BCE, the world's first empire has collapsed, leaving behind a transformed political landscape, where the dream of unity has been planted even as the reality crumbles. Yet the fall of Akkad doesn't mean the end of imperial ambition. As decades pass and the immediate chaos subsides, new leaders emerge with their own visions of uniting the land between the rivers. In the south, the city of Ur experiences a remarkable renaissance, creating what historians call the Ur III period, a time when Sumerian culture enjoys one final flowering before gradually giving way to newer influences. Picture yourself in the court of Ur-Nammu, the founder of Ur's new dynasty around 2112 BCE. Unlike the Akkadian emperors who ruled through military might, Ur-Nammu presents himself primarily as a lawgiver and builder. His legal code, carved in stone, represents humanity's first systematic attempt to create written laws that apply equally to all citizens regardless of their social status. These aren't just royal proclamations, but carefully reasoned attempts to create justice through consistent legal principles. As you breathe in the rhythm of ancient time, Imagine walking through the magnificent ziggurat that Ur-Nammu builds in honor of the moon god Nana. This isn't just a temple, but a statement in brick and bitumen about humanity's relationship with the divine. 3 massive terraces rise toward the sky, each smaller than the one below, creating a mountain of human construction that dominates the flat landscape for miles in every direction. The engineering required to build such a structure, the coordination of thousands of workers, the mathematical precision of its proportions, all represent new heights of human achievement. Under Ur-Nammu's son, Shulgi, this Neo-Sumerian state reaches extraordinary levels of organization and prosperity. Shulgi rules for an incredible 48 years, time enough to implement reforms that touch every aspect of society. He standardizes the calendar, ensuring that festivals and agricultural activities are coordinated across his realm. He establishes schools where scribes learn not just practical skills, but literature, mathematics, and the classical Sumerian language, which is already becoming archaic, even as it gains prestige as the tongue of scholarship and religion. Picture yourself as a student in one of these ancient schools around 2050 BCE. Your days begin before dawn with prayers and offerings to the gods of wisdom. Then comes the painstaking work of learning to read and write, copying out classical texts on clay tablets, memorizing the complex rules of cuneiform script, practicing mathematics by calculating the areas of fields and the volumes of granaries. Your education isn't just about practical skills. It's about joining an intellectual tradition that stretches back through centuries of accumulated knowledge. The literature you study includes some of humanity's earliest and greatest works. Epic tales of heroes like Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, who befriends a wild man named Enkidu and searches for immortality after his friend's death. Creation myths that explain how the gods shaped the world and created humanity from clay. Wisdom literature that offers practical advice about how to live a good life, how to treat others fairly, how to navigate the complexities of urban society. But perhaps most remarkably, you're also studying works of personal reflection and philosophical questioning. Texts that wrestle with the problem of suffering, asking why good people sometimes endure hardship while the wicked prosper. Poetry that expresses deep emotions about love, loss, and longing. These ancient Mesopotamians aren't just creating the foundations of government, law, and technology. They're also exploring the full range of human emotional and intellectual experience. As your mind drifts with the flow of these ancient rivers, notice how the Neo-Sumerian state represents something different from the Akkadian Empire that preceded it. Where Sargon and his successors ruled through military dominance, the rulers of Ur govern through administrative sophistication and cultural prestige. They create detailed records of every aspect of their realm: how much grain each field produces, how many sheep each shepherd tends, how much silver each merchant owes in taxes. This isn't just bureaucratic efficiency. It's an attempt to understand and rationally manage human society on a scale never before attempted. The archives of this period, preserved on thousands of clay tablets, give us an incredibly detailed picture of daily life in the world's first bureaucratic state. We can follow individual careers as young men rise through the administrative hierarchy. We can trace family relationships across generations. We can see how trade networks connect distant regions. We can observe the seasonal rhythms of agricultural work and religious festivals. In many ways, we know more about ordinary life in ancient Ur than we do about most later civilizations. Yet even this sophisticated state faces challenges that prove insurmountable. Climate change brings periods of drought that strain the agricultural system. The constant irrigation required to maintain productivity in this arid environment gradually increases soil salinity, reducing crop yields. External enemies, particularly the Elamites from the Iranian highlands, launch increasingly destructive raids. Internal tensions between different ethnic groups and social classes create political instability. The end, when it comes around 2004 BCE, is swift and devastating. Elamite armies capture the capital, destroy its temples, and carry the last king of Ur into captivity. A contemporary lament describes the destruction in heartbreaking terms. The city lies in ruins, its people scattered, its gods abandoned. Yet even in defeat, the cultural achievements of this Neo-Sumerian Renaissance continue to influence subsequent civilizations. As you drift toward the deeper currents of sleep, let your mind follow the rivers forward through time to around 1894 BCE, when a new chapter begins with the rise of a previously minor city called Babylon. The name means Gate of the Gods, and under a dynasty of rulers from the Amorite tribes, this city will grow to eclipse all its predecessors in power, wealth, and cultural influence. Picture yourself arriving in early Babylon as a young merchant, around 1800 BCE. The city sits strategically at a point where the Tigris and Euphrates come closest together, making it a natural hub for trade and communication. Goods from the mountains of the north meet products from the marshes of the south. Caravans from the distant west exchange their wares for the agricultural surplus of the Mesopotamian heartland. This is a cosmopolitan place where different peoples, languages, and traditions blend together in the constant bustle of commercial activity. But Babylon's true greatness will emerge under its sixth king, a ruler whose name has echoed through history as synonymous with law and justice, Hammurabi. Taking the throne around 1792 BCE, this remarkable monarch will rule for 43 years and transform not just his city, but the entire concept of royal authority and legal governance. Imagine yourself as a citizen of Babylon during Hammurabi's reign, witnessing the creation of something unprecedented, a comprehensive legal code carved in stone and displayed publicly for all to see. This isn't just a collection of royal decrees, but a systematic attempt to codify justice itself. The famous Code of Hammurabi, with its 282 laws covering everything from property disputes to family relationships, represents humanity's most ambitious, early attempt to create a fair and consistent legal system. The code begins with a remarkable prologue in which Hammurabi describes his divine mandate to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil, to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. This isn't just political propaganda, it's a revolutionary statement about the purpose of government. For the first time in history, a ruler claims that his primary responsibility isn't conquest or personal glory, but the protection of his subjects and the maintenance of social order through just laws. As you breathe slowly and let these ancient scenes flow through your mind, picture the stone stele on which Hammurabi's laws are carved. At the top, a relief sculpture shows the king receiving the symbols of justice from Shamash, the sun god. Below, in neat columns of cuneiform script, the laws themselves are laid out with careful attention to different social classes and circumstances. The penalties may seem harsh by modern standards, but they represent a crucial step toward the principle that justice should be predictable, consistent, and based on established law rather than arbitrary royal whim. Tonight, as these ancient stories carry you toward peaceful sleep, remember that you're witnessing humanity's first great experiments in living together. From the independent city-states of Sumer to the empire of Sargon, from the bureaucratic state of Ur to the law code of Hammurabi, these early Mesopotamians are solving problems that still challenge us today. How to create fair laws, how to govern diverse populations, how to balance individual rights with collective needs, how to preserve knowledge and pass it on to future generations. The rivers continue to flow, carrying the story forward through time. In the centuries to come, new peoples will arrive with their own contributions to this growing tradition of civilization. Great empires will rise that dwarf even Hammurabi's achievements. New technologies will emerge that transform daily life. New forms of art and literature will explore ever deeper aspects of human experience. But the foundations are now firmly established. Writing preserves knowledge across generations. Laws create frameworks for justice. Cities provide environments where specialists can develop their skills. Trade networks connect distant peoples in webs of mutual benefit. Religious systems offer meaning and moral guidance. Administrative systems coordinate complex activities across vast territories. These are the gifts that ancient Mesopotamia gives to all subsequent civilizations. These are the innovations that make possible everything that follows in human history. As you rest tonight, carried gently towards sleep by the rhythm of these eternal rivers, know that you're part of this continuing story. The same human creativity that built the first cities builds our modern world. The same desire for justice that inspired Hammurabi's laws inspires our legal systems. The same curiosity that drove Sumerian scribes to record their observations drives our scientific research. The story flows onward, as constant and vital as the rivers themselves, carrying the dreams and achievements of ancient Mesopotamia into our modern world and beyond. The flowing waters of time carry us deeper into the story of ancient Mesopotamia, where around 1600 BCE, the established order faces its greatest upheaval yet. As you settle more comfortably into sleep, imagine the shock that must have rippled through the civilized world when news arrived that Babylon itself, the mighty city of Hammurabi's laws, had fallen to warriors from a distant, almost mythical land. Picture yourself as a merchant returning from a trading expedition to find your familiar world transformed. The Hittites, an Indo-European people from the mountains of Anatolia, have achieved something that seemed impossible. They've marched over 500 miles from their homeland, struck like lightning at the heart of Mesopotamian civilization, and withdrawn with unimaginable treasures. Babylon's walls, which had stood unconquered for centuries, proved no match for these foreign warriors and their iron weapons, superior horses, and military innovations that the Mesopotamians had never encountered. But perhaps even more remarkable than this stunning raid is what happens next. Into the power vacuum left by the Hittite withdrawal steps, a people who had been quietly integrating into Mesopotamian society for generations. The Kassites, originally mountain dwellers from the Zagros range, had served as mercenaries, settled as farmers, and gradually adopted the sophisticated culture of the land between the rivers. Now, with characteristic pragmatism, they claim the throne of Babylon and establish what will become the longest ruling dynasty in Mesopotamian history. Let your mind drift through the centuries that follow, as these Kassite rulers demonstrate something remarkable about the power of cultural adaptation. Unlike conquerors who impose their own traditions on subject peoples, the Kassites embrace Mesopotamian civilization so completely that they become its most devoted guardians. They restore temples, preserve ancient texts, maintain the complex irrigation systems, and continue the scholarly traditions that have accumulated over millennia. Imagine yourself as a young scribe in the Kassite court around 1400 BCE, copying out ancient Sumerian hymns that are already over 1,000 years old. Your teachers emphasize that you're not just learning to write, but preserving the wisdom of ages. The Epic of Gilgamesh, creation myths, mathematical treatises, astronomical observations, medical knowledge, all must be carefully maintained for future generations. You're part of an unbroken chain of learning that stretches back to humanity's first experiments with written language. The Kassite period, lasting nearly 4 centuries, represents something unprecedented in ancient history: cultural continuity maintained through political transformation. These foreign rulers become more Babylonian than many native-born citizens, commissioning new temples in traditional styles, supporting the ancient priesthood, and even adopting Mesopotamian names alongside their original ones. They understand that true power lies not just in military conquest, but in winning the hearts and minds of their subjects through respect for local traditions. As you breathe deeply, And let these ancient scenes wash over your consciousness. Picture the international world that emerges during this era. The Kassite kings of Babylon exchanged letters with Egyptian pharaohs, calling each other brother and negotiating royal marriages. They trade diplomatic gifts with Hittite emperors and Assyrian rulers. A complex web of alliances, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges connects the great powers of the ancient world in ways that won't be seen again for centuries. This is humanity's first experiment in international diplomacy, conducted in the Akkadian language that has become the lingua franca of the civilized world. Royal archives preserve hundreds of these diplomatic letters, revealing sophisticated negotiations over everything from trade routes to marriage dowries. The correspondence shows rulers who understand that lasting power requires not just military strength, but diplomatic skill, economic cooperation, and cultural prestige. But even as the Kassite kings maintain peace and prosperity in southern Mesopotamia, new forces are stirring in the north that will reshape the ancient world. Let your mind travel upstream along the Tigris River to the city of Ashur, where a people with very different values and ambitions are beginning their rise to power. The Assyrians, originally traders and merchants, are transforming themselves into the most efficient military machine the world has ever seen. Picture yourself standing on the walls of Ashur around 1300 BCE, watching as young men train with weapons that represent the cutting edge of military technology. Iron swords that hold their edge better than bronze. Composite bows that can drive arrows through armor. Horse-drawn chariots that provide unprecedented mobility on the battlefield. These Assyrian warriors are developing not just superior equipment, but new tactical approaches that will revolutionize warfare. Unlike earlier conquerors who relied primarily on courage and numbers, the Assyrians approach warfare as a science. They develop specialized units, heavily armored infantry, mobile cavalry, expert archers, and engineers skilled in siege warfare. They create detailed intelligence networks that provide information about enemy strengths and weaknesses. They establish supply systems that can support large armies operating far from home. Most importantly, they develop a systematic approach to psychological warfare, using calculated brutality to discourage resistance. Imagine yourself as a scribe recording the boasts of an Assyrian king around 1100 BCE, as Tiglath-Pileser and describes his conquests in terms that would have shocked earlier Mesopotamian rulers. Where Sumerian kings typically claimed divine favor and righteous rule, Assyrian monarchs glory in their ability to inspire terror. They describe in vivid detail the fates that await those who resist their armies. Cities burned, populations deported, enemy kings flayed alive or impaled on stakes. This isn't mere cruelty for its own sake, but a calculated strategy. The Assyrians understand that the reputation for merciless treatment of enemies can be more effective than actual warfare. Cities that hear detailed accounts of what happened to their neighbors often surrender without a fight, saving the Assyrians the time, expense, and casualties of siege warfare. Fear becomes a weapon as powerful as iron swords or composite bows. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the realm of sleep, follow the expansion of Assyrian power across the ancient world. By 800 BCE, their empire stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, from the mountains of Iran to the borders of Egypt. This isn't just territorial conquest, but the creation of the first truly international state, governing dozens of different peoples with their own languages, religions, and cultural traditions. Picture yourself as a provincial governor in this vast empire, responsible for maintaining order in territories that would take weeks to cross on foot. Your administrative challenges are immense, collecting taxes from farmers who speak languages you don't understand, maintaining loyalty among local nobles who remember their independence, coordinating with military commanders who may be hundreds of miles away, reporting to a king whose capital lies beyond the horizon. The Assyrian solution to these challenges creates the template for imperial administration, that will influence state building for millennia to come. They divide their territories into manageable provinces, each governed by appointed officials who report directly to the king. They establish efficient communication systems with roads, way stations, and mounted messengers who can carry orders across the empire in record time. They create detailed records of everything: population counts, agricultural production, tax revenues, military resources. But perhaps most importantly, they develop policies for managing cultural diversity within their empire. Conquered peoples who submit peacefully are often allowed to maintain their local customs, religions, and leadership structures as long as they pay tribute and provide military service when required. Those who resist face deportation to distant parts of the empire, a policy that breaks up potential centers of rebellion while providing skilled workers for underdeveloped regions. Imagine yourself as one of these deportees, torn from your homeland around 700 BCE and resettled in a distant province. The experience is traumatic, but you gradually discover that the Assyrian Empire offers unexpected opportunities. Your skills as a craftsman are valued regardless of your ethnic background. Your children can receive education and potentially rise to positions of responsibility within the imperial administration. The very diversity of the empire creates a cosmopolitan environment where different traditions blend and influence each other. This mixing of peoples and cultures produces remarkable intellectual achievements. Assyrian kings, despite their reputation for military brutality, proved to be enthusiastic patrons of learning. The royal library at Nineveh, assembled under King Ashurbanipal around 650 BCE, contains over 30,000 clay tablets representing the accumulated knowledge of Mesopotamian civilization. Scribes have systematically collected literary works, scientific treatises, historical records, and religious texts from across the empire. Picture yourself wandering through this ancient library, the first truly comprehensive collection of human knowledge. Here are the original tablets containing the Epic of Gilgamesh, carefully preserved and copied for future generations. Mathematical texts that reveal sophisticated understanding of geometry and algebra, astronomical observations that track the movements of planets with remarkable precision, medical treatises that describe surgical procedures and pharmaceutical preparations, legal documents that show the evolution of law codes from Hammurabi to the present day. This isn't just a storage facility, but an active center of scholarship where specialists work to preserve, organize, and expand human knowledge. They create the world's first systematic catalogs, organizing information by subject matter and cross-referencing related materials. They develop standardized copying procedures to ensure that texts are transmitted accurately across generations. They write commentaries that explain difficult passages and provide historical context for later readers. As you drift toward the deepest currents of sleep, let your mind contemplate the irony of the Assyrian achievement. These warriors, feared throughout the ancient world for their ruthless efficiency in battle, also create the most sophisticated system yet developed for preserving and transmitting human culture. Their empire becomes a vast network for sharing knowledge, connecting scholars in distant provinces, and ensuring that the intellectual achievements of one generation are available to the next. But empires, as you've learned in your journey through ancient time, carry within themselves the seeds of their own destruction. The very success that makes the Assyrian Empire impressive also creates problems that prove impossible to solve. The constant military campaigns required to maintain control over such vast territories drain the imperial treasury and exhaust the population. The harsh treatment of subject peoples creates deep resentments that simmer beneath the surface of imperial order. The administrative complexity of governing diverse populations across enormous distances strains even the most sophisticated bureaucratic systems. Picture yourself in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh around 630 BCE, as cracks begin to appear in what had seemed an invincible imperial edifice. Rebellions flare up in distant provinces faster than they can be suppressed. provincial governors begin asserting increasing independence from central authority. The costs of maintaining garrisons throughout the empire consume ever larger portions of imperial revenues. External enemies, sensing weakness, begin probing the empire's frontiers. The end, when it comes, is swift and total. In 626 BCE, Babylon rebels under a Chaldean leader named Nabopolassar, who forms an alliance with the Medes of Iran. Together, these forces attack the Assyrian heartland directly, capturing the great capitals of Ashur and Nineveh. The empire that had dominated the ancient world for centuries vanishes so completely that within generations, its magnificent cities lie abandoned beneath growing mounds of earth. Yet even in destruction, the Assyrian legacy endures. Their administrative innovations, their military techniques, their approaches to governing diverse populations, their methods for preserving and transmitting knowledge, all provide models that subsequent empires will adapt and refine. The very roads they built to move their armies become highways for merchants and scholars. The communication systems they developed to coordinate military campaigns serve the needs of peaceful administration. The libraries they assembled to glorify their achievements preserve the cultural heritage of humanity for future civilizations. As these ancient scenes fade into the gentle realm of dreams, rest assured that this story of rise and fall, achievement and destruction, innovation and preservation will continue flowing like the eternal rivers themselves. Tomorrow night, we'll follow the current forward to witness the final flowering of Mesopotamian civilization as Babylon rises once more to heights of splendor that will capture the imagination of the world and echo through the centuries in legend and memory. For now, let the rhythm of your breathing match the timeless flow of the Tigris and Euphrates, carrying the dreams and achievements of countless generations toward the peaceful harbor of sleep. As the ancient waters of time carry us toward our final destination, picture yourself standing beside the Euphrates River on a warm evening in 605 BCE. The setting sun casts golden light across the greatest city the world has ever known, and you're about to witness the last magnificent chapter in the story of Mesopotamian civilization. Babylon has risen from the ashes of Assyrian domination, like a phoenix of mud brick and precious metals, more glorious than ever before. Let your mind's eye follow the massive walls that encircle this wonder of the ancient world. These aren't merely fortifications, but statements carved in stone and clay about human ambition reaching toward the divine. The walls stretch so wide that 4 horse-drawn chariots can race side by side along their tops. Guard towers rise at regular intervals, their surfaces decorated with glazed brick reliefs showing lions, dragons, and sacred bulls in brilliant blues and golds that catch the light like captured starfire. As you breathe slowly and deeply, imagine walking through the famous Ishtar Gate, where the most skilled artisans in the known world have created a masterpiece that defies description. Hundreds of ceramic animals march in eternal procession across walls that seem to glow with inner light. The craftsmanship required to create such beauty, the mathematical precision needed to calculate the angles and proportions, the artistic vision that conceived such magnificence, all represent the culmination of 3,000 years of human creativity and technical mastery. Picture yourself as a young architect in the court of Nebuchadnezzar II, around 580 BCE, tasked with designing buildings that will honor both the gods and the greatest king in the world. Your mind must stretch to encompass projects of unprecedented scope and ambition. The hanging gardens that will become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, with their terraced slopes carrying the green abundance of distant mountains into the heart of the desert city. The great ziggurat that rises in 7 colored tiers toward the heavens, each level painted a different hue and crowned with a temple where the god Marduk dwells among mortals. Let your consciousness drift through the palace complex where Nebuchadnezzar holds court, surrounded by treasures gathered from the corners of the known world. Silver from the mountains of Anatolia, gold from the mines of Nubia, precious stones from the valleys of Afghanistan, cedar wood from the forests of Lebanon. Representatives from dozens of kingdoms wait in magnificent halls to present tribute and negotiate treaties with the master of the civilized world. Imagine yourself as a scholar in this cosmopolitan environment, where the accumulated wisdom of millennia has been gathered into the greatest libraries ever assembled. Here, scribes work day and night copying ancient texts, preserving the Epic of Gilgamesh for future generations, maintaining mathematical treatises that reveal the secrets of the heavens, recording medical knowledge that can heal both body and spirit. You're not just studying the past, but actively participating in humanity's greatest experiment in preserving and expanding knowledge. The astronomical observations conducted from Babylon's temple towers represent the pinnacle of ancient science. Picture yourself climbing the steep stairs of the Great Ziggurat on a clear night, carrying clay tablets to record the movements of planets whose patterns hold the keys to understanding divine will. These Babylonian astronomers can predict eclipses with remarkable accuracy, track the cycles of Venus across decades, and create mathematical models that describe celestial mechanics with precision that won't be matched for centuries. As you settle deeper into the peaceful realm of approaching sleep, let your mind follow the trade routes that connect Babylon to every corner of the known world. Caravans arrive daily from distant lands, their pack animals laden with exotic goods and their leaders carrying news from kingdoms whose names sound like poetry. The Persian highlands, the Indus Valley, the shores of the Mediterranean, the mysterious lands beyond the Black Sea, all are connected through this vast network of commercial relationships that makes Babylon the beating heart of international commerce. But even as you marvel at these achievements, remember that you're witnessing the final act in an ancient drama. The very success that makes Babylon so magnificent also creates vulnerabilities that its rulers struggle to address. The enormous cost of maintaining such splendor strains even the wealthiest treasury. The complex administrative challenges of governing diverse populations across vast territories push bureaucratic systems to their limits. External pressures from ambitious neighbors grow stronger with each passing year. Picture yourself as a courtier during the reign of Nabonidus, the last native king of Babylon, around 550 BCE. You watch with growing concern as this eccentric monarch makes decisions that alienate the powerful priests of Marduk, the backbone of Babylonian society. His prolonged absence from the capital, his devotion to gods traditionally considered secondary, his apparent neglect of crucial religious festivals, all create an atmosphere of uncertainty and discontent that weakens the kingdom from within. Meanwhile, beyond the eastern horizon, a new power rises with unprecedented speed and ambition. The Persians, led by Cyrus the Great, have overthrown their Median overlords and begun conquering territory at a pace that astounds the civilized world. Unlike previous conquerors who rule through fear and oppression, Cyrus offers something revolutionary: a policy of tolerance and respect for local traditions that makes Persian rule seem preferable to the uncertainty of continued resistance. As your mind drifts with the eternal flow of the rivers, imagine the moment in 539 BCE when Persian forces approach Babylon's mighty walls. But instead of a desperate siege, something unprecedented occurs. The gates open without resistance, and Cyrus enters the city not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. The priests of Marduk, alienated by Nabonidus' religious policies, welcome the Persian king, as chosen by their god, to restore proper worship and just governance. Picture yourself among the crowds that line Babylon's streets as Cyrus makes his triumphal entry. This isn't the violent conquest that had characterized previous changes of rule, but a remarkably peaceful transition that preserves the city's treasures and honors its traditions. The Persian king participates in Babylonian religious ceremonies, restores exiled peoples to their homelands, and proclaims policies of tolerance that seem almost miraculous to populations accustomed to harsh imperial rule. The famous Cyrus cylinder, with its proclamation of religious freedom and human rights, represents one of history's most remarkable documents. As you imagine holding this clay barrel in your hands, feel the weight of its revolutionary message. For the first time in recorded history, a conqueror claims legitimacy not through military might alone, but through promises to govern justly, respect local customs, and protect the rights of all subjects regardless of their ethnic or religious background. Yet even as Babylon retains its physical splendor under Persian rule, something fundamental has changed forever. The age of independent Mesopotamian civilization has ended, replaced by inclusion in a vast multicultural empire centered far from the ancient land between the rivers. The cuneiform script that had preserved human thought for 3 millennia gradually gives way to alphabetic writing systems that are easier to learn and use. The Akkadian language that had served as the diplomatic tongue of the ancient world slowly yields to Aramaic and eventually to Persian and Greek. Picture yourself as one of the last traditional scribes, around 400 BCE, carefully copying ancient texts whose meaning grows more obscure with each passing generation. You're preserving not just words on clay, but the final echoes of humanity's first great experiment in civilization. The myths that explained how the gods created the world, the laws that governed the first cities, the literature that explored the deepest questions of human existence, all depend on your careful work for their survival. As these ancient scenes begin to fade into the gentle mists of dream, let your consciousness follow the rivers forward through the centuries that remain. Alexander the Great will march through these lands, bringing Greek culture and language that will blend with older traditions in new and unexpected ways. The Parthians will rule from magnificent palaces, maintaining some threads of continuity with the ancient past, while introducing fresh influences from Central Asia. Islamic armies will eventually transform the religious and cultural landscape entirely, building new cities whose splendor rivals anything the ancient world produced. Through all these transformations, the fundamental gifts of Mesopotamian civilization continue to flow like underground streams, surfacing in unexpected places and times. The concept of written law that ensures justice through consistent application. The idea that government exists to serve the people rather than merely to enrich rulers. The understanding that diverse populations can live together peacefully under systems that respect their differences while maintaining overall unity. The mathematical insights that allow us to measure time and space with precision. The astronomical knowledge that reveals the movements of celestial bodies and our place within the cosmic order. The literary traditions that explore love and loss, heroism and mortality. The search for meaning in an often incomprehensible universe. The technological innovations that make urban life possible, from irrigation systems to metallurgy, from monumental architecture to record-keeping systems. Most profoundly, Mesopotamia demonstrated humanity's capacity for collective achievement, our ability to create institutions and cultural traditions that outlast individual lifetimes and accumulate knowledge across generations. The scribes, who first pressed wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets, could never have imagined that their simple innovation would eventually preserve the Epic of Gilgamesh for readers separated from them by 5,000 years. The farmers who first channeled river water into artificial canals could never have foreseen that their techniques would sustain cities housing millions of people. Tonight, as you rest in the comfort of your modern bed, surrounded by the fruits of technological advancement they could never have imagined, remember that you are part of this continuing story. The same human creativity that built the first cities designs our modern metropolises. The same desire for justice that inspired Hammurabi's laws shapes our legal systems. The same curiosity about the heavens that drove Babylonian astronomers powers our space exploration. The same longing for meaning that produced the world's first literature continues to inspire poets and storytellers today. The rivers still flow through the land that gave birth to civilization, though the cities along their banks bear different names and serve different purposes. The ziggurat of Ur stands partially restored, a testament to human achievement preserved for future generations to study and admire. Archaeological teams continue to uncover new treasures buried beneath the accumulated dust of centuries, each discovery adding new chapters to our understanding of humanity's first great experiment in living together. In museums around the world, clay tablets covered with cuneiform writing wait patiently for scholars to decode their messages, carrying conversations across the vast gulf of time. The Ishtar Gate of Babylon has been reconstructed in Berlin, its glazed brick animals still marching in eternal procession, still capturing the wonder of visitors who marvel at the skill and vision of ancient craftsmen. The story that began beside the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates continues in every human settlement, every written word, every law code, every school, every temple, mosque and church, every mathematical calculation, every artistic creation that seeks to capture beauty and preserve it for the future. We are all children of Mesopotamia, inheritors of the dreams and achievements of those first farmers who decided to stay beside the rivers and build something permanent, something that would outlast their own brief lives and become the foundation for everything that followed. As sleep carries you gently into its peaceful embrace, let the rhythm of your breathing match the eternal flow of those ancient waters, carrying the wisdom and wonder of humanity's first civilization into your dreams and beyond. The story ends here, but it also never ends, flowing onward like the rivers themselves, connecting past to present to future in an unbroken stream of human aspiration and achievement. Rest now in the knowledge that you have journeyed to the very beginning of our shared human story, to the moment when we first learned to dream together and build those dreams into lasting reality. The land between the rivers sleeps peacefully beneath the same stars that shone on Gilgamesh and Hammurabi, on Sargon and Nebuchadnezzar, carrying their legacy forward into tomorrow and beyond, ensuring that the first chapter of civilization remains forever a living part of our continuing human adventure.